the comparison I'm making right now is a comparison to the week that I think was the beginning of the end of the Biden presidency, which was the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Oh man, I'm gonna do my best to not be too snarky here. I haven't had all my coffee yet, and I'm gonna try and be Christ-like. But this guy right here, Chuck Todd, just compared Donald Trump's first week of tariffs to Joe Biden's Afghanistan withdrawal botch. And by the way, while he's saying this, literally the stock market chart is in the green, way up in the green. So again, ironic. So let's get into this CNN meltdown. Before we start the video though, please like the video. It makes the biggest difference in the world, and others get to see the videos as well. Let us begin.
Chuck Todd, let me start with you big picture on this week, because I mean, there have been a lot of weeks of history that you and I have covered often together when Donald Trump has been in the White House. But this one may end up being one of the most history-making.
It could. You know, the comparison I'm making right now is a comparison to the week that I think was the beginning of the end of the Biden presidency, which was the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. Because this week could have that kind of impact. At that point, once Joe Biden lost the competence question of people, because the Afghanistan issue really hurt him harder because the core competency voters thought Joe Biden had was on national security. So when it was like,
you mean it had nothing to do with the loss of life, all of the injuries, making deals with the Taliban, requesting them to protect the United States while IS this whole time just walked right past them? You mean it had nothing to do with the people falling from the sky, holding on to jets, trying to get to freedom, the thousands upon thousands of people we don't even know if they were supposed to be on those planes, ended up in the United States? You mean it had nothing to do with that? We're talking about cognitive decline. The cognitive decline part happened when that whole debate with Donald Trump and Joe Biden happened. We weren't even talking about cognitive decline. We were talking about what the heck is going on in Afghanistan, and why did we just waste 20 years of a conflict for the last several weeks just to end the way it did? But again, I'm trying not to be too snarky here.
like, whoa, he's messing that up. It started to erode confidence in everything else.
It was a major turning point for his whole presidency.
And he never recovers from it. This week, for me, feels similar to that this is Donald Trump's Afghanistan moment. Because the core competency voters had with him was, oh, but the economy. You may have had all these other things, but boy, this guy, the economy was pretty good in Trump 1.0, and that's what I want back. I want that economy back. And he's botching the one thing that voters, even those that were not big fans of maybe his national security or his character issues, they thought he had this.
By the way, no one agrees with him. And by the way, I even tried to use AI like ChatGPT and Grok. I looked for anyone who made a point like this to compare the Afghanistan withdrawal and try to make this weird correlation to the cognitive decline. No one, absolutely no one. But then I found a rather interesting clip. Some might say a little hypocritical, if you will. This is quite interesting. Let's get into this.
I sit here and I'll defend a little bit of this in that I would argue the reason people were able to come to their own conclusion on Joe Biden is because of the media coverage. Look, we were subtle. He's using the back staircase. He's not using the front staircase. Hey, he's not doing any interviews. So there was this reluctance to draw the conclusion to say, is he not doing this? And that I agree with. That was held back a lot.
This is why I love making these videos, because the irony of talking about cognitive decline from Chuck Todd. I might mention this could be cognitive decline, considering you went over on CNN to talk about this Afghanistan withdrawal, compare it to Donald Trump's economic week of disasters, trying to compare a cognitive decline, but then you forgot to mention the most important part that you mentioned on Piers Morgan, how the media helped cover up the cognitive decline and gave layups to Joe Biden to make sure he doesn't look bad. I would say that's the cognitive decline, but I digress. You can leave your comments and opinions down below. I have to drink some more coffee.
Back in the late 80s, when it was clear Ronald Reagan wasn't necessarily running everything in the White House. Whether you want to call it decorum, whatever you want to call it, look, there were plenty members of the media. I remember David Ignatius in the Washington Post plenty of individual people questioning whether he should run. I certainly questioned whether he should run. You didn't understand, there were some of that. But I understand the argument about the collective on that front. The only thing I can chalk it up to is this, whatever you want to call it, this fear that some members of the media had sometimes that they would be perceived as helping Trump if they somehow diminished Biden, right? That it was some sort of zero-sum game. Mm-hmm. And I think this has been the fundamental mistake that many members of the traditional press have done.
And I'm actually going to be honest with you, I will agree with him on this point because it does happen even on the Republican side, especially on independent media, especially on X. I'm not going to name names. But the one thing the Republican Party does a lot better than Democrats, especially media, is taking care of their own or making sure people are held accountable, but then you move on. The difference is over on the Democrat Party, boy, if you stick your neck out like we saw with Chuck Schumer, you're done. And that happens a lot in the media as well. So I will actually agree with him on that point. However, trying to be as objective as possible, when you look at the Democrat side of things, if you say one bad thing, it's over for you. I mean, heck, if you go to meet with Donald Trump and try to say hello, try to reconcile, you saw what happened to Morning Joe.
I think there was this concern among some folks that Donald Trump would come in for a second term and kind of be a lame duck. He ain't no lame duck. If anything, he's a soaring eagle. What am I talking about here? Let's talk about Trump executive orders in 2025. He's already signed 111 so far. That is the most at this point in a presidency in at least 100 years. In fact, it's the most in any single year, and we're only in April, since Harry S. Truman in the early 1950s.
Now, I am looking for any data that would suggest we have any comparison to the Afghanistan withdrawal botch job, to any sort of data that would suggest, people are really upset with Donald Trump. Well, I'm appealing to CNN because I want to use left-leaning media sources in order to talk with left-leaning media sources or interact with the data. Well, this is what CNN has to say, and again, I can't find anything or anyone that suggests we have any comparison to the Afghanistan withdrawal or cognitive decline. In fact, we have quite the contrary.
The bottom line is whether you like Trump or you don't like him, you can't say that he's come in and not try to deliver on what he at least believes was his promises on the campaign trail, and he's doing so in historic fashion.
How are people reacting to and feel about Trump's approach?
Yeah, okay, so Trump's approach here, what are we talking about? Trump's approach to presidential power. I think the American people recognize what he's doing here is completely different. We're talking, get this, 86% of the American public believes that Trump's approach to presidential power is completely different from past presidents, compared to only 14% who believe it is in line with precedent. And we're talking about at least 79% of Democrats, independents, and Republicans. So again, you can agree or you can disagree with Donald Trump, but what you can't disagree with is that he's doing things very differently. I have used the Frank Sinatra quote before. He is doing it, quote unquote, my way, and that is what Donald Trump has done throughout both of his presidential terms, and he's certainly doing that, Kate Baldwin, in term number 2.
So completely differently, clearly they agree, but take it a step further? Do the people think he has too much, he's taken too much power?
Yeah, this I think is the real question, right? You can believe that he's doing stuff completely differently, but do you think that he has a little too much power or not? And this is interesting. So Trump's presidential power is too much, the right amount, too little. Well, 47% say too much, but then you get 36% who say the right amount. Then you get 17% who say too little. So you're essentially dealing with a majority of the American public, 53%, who do not say that Trump has too much power. They either says he has too little power or the right amount of power. So the idea, that argument that Donald Trump is, quote unquote, a king, that I don't think holds with the American people. It does hold maybe with 47%, but with the majority of folks, they believe Donald Trump's doing something completely differently, and they don't believe he has too much power, and the executive orders he signed certainly suggest he's no lame duck. He is, as I said at the beginning, a soaring eagle.
On the markets, does the president think it's a big deal that today the Dow Jones is down at one point more than 1,100 points?
Well, to start with, we focus on the trends in the economy, not any one day and any single indicator. Unlike his predecessor, the president does not look at the stock market as a means by which to judge the economy.
Now, one thing I want to point out is I really don't think Democrats realize they're getting caught left and right on these very odd stances, and the flip-flopping that's happening is insane. There are people who dedicate their whole life just to find these clips, and then people like me, we put them on the internet for you guys to make a decision on how you feel about all of this. Because again, if we're going to be making comparisons, let us compare. Apparently, back during the Joe Biden administration, nobody cared about the stock market. So now, why all of a sudden do we see Democrats that care about the stock market?
Here's the way I think they're thinking about it. It feels like the direction they're heading in is that what Trump basically wants is for our allies to consume a lot more of our products and for China to produce a lot less of what we consume. And so I think what he's going for is a kind of soft global embargo on China. And the way that he went about doing that is he basically picked up a baseball bat and said to the entire global elites, that's a really nice stock market you've got. It would be a shame if anything happened to it. And the reason that I think that that was effective is, I mean, Lutnick is saying that they could never have gotten such good deals if that pressure that you're actually describing wasn't there. But I think that that was more designed for a domestic audience. And the reason that I think that is this. I've been thinking a lot about the 10 million Americans who lost their homes in the 2008 financial crisis and how President Obama's first act in office was to give $700 billion to the banks that caused it, including $30 billion in bonuses to the crooks who organized it. And I'm thinking about how those very Americans saw a president pick Wall Street over Main Street, and what they saw this whole week was a president willing to go out there and fight for the forgotten men and women of this heartland and take on the entire international global order.
Okay. First of all, you cannot say.
Alright, so thank you guys for watching this video. What I really think is happening is a lot of these Democrats are getting caught with the flip-flopping, so it looks like they're trying to go very, very extreme to one side, like hating on Donald Trump so bad, but a lot of them are actually getting caught on not hating on Donald Trump for the same things they should have been hating Joe Biden on. And by the way, I will grant, I have no problem at all if people want to flip-flop, but they have to admit what they did on not covering Joe Biden was wrong. You can't just have a flip-flop and act like, hold on, you didn't just flip-flop here without acknowledging the lies either you were saying or the cover-ups you were helping with. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for everything. We'll see you all later, and God bless.